Een hele goede avond en welkom bij de derde en laatste aflevering van een andere kijk op boeken vanuit een Nederlands-Aziatisch perspectief. Vandaag heb ik een publiek erbij. Hallo, welkom allemaal. Dank jullie wel dat jullie erbij zijn vanavond bij deze roundtable talk. Maar we zitten in een rijtje omdat de pandemie nog gaande is en dit het nu nog volgens de coronaregels het beste is om te doen. We gaan deze avond in het Engels voeren, want dat is het prettigst voor mijn gasten voor vanavond. En die ga ik dan ook in het Engels welkom heten en voorstellen. So, in English, again, thank you all for coming to the third and final episode of an Asian perspective on Dutch books, where the Pan-Asian Collective is working together with OBA Amsterdam to present these different episodes of showing you what kind of diversity there is in writers within the Dutch Asian community. And we like to help creatives meet each other and be seen through collaborations with different partners. And thanks to the OBA, we have found one here in the heart of Amsterdam. And tonight I have three wonderful writers, talented writers with me in order. Sun Lee, who is the writer of the Dutch book, De zoetzure smaak van dromen. I don't think there's an English translation yet, is there? No, sorry. Your book came out in 2016. It's a novel that's based on your life, an autobiography, as we call it then. And you also wrote parts for the book, the children's book Bedtijd voor rebelse meisjes, 100 verhalen van Nederlandse bijzondere vrouwen. That was published this year, 2021,
Yeah.
where they have a little, a bundle of short stories about famous Dutch women who were an inspiration for rebel girls. Welcome. Next to you is Ye Tao, who is the writer of several books. The first one is Schemeringen boven Shanghai, or in English, Shanghai Blue, that came out in 2015. And the Dutch translation came out in 2006.
Same year.
Yeah, the same year, but also another one in 2019, right? An edited one.
Yeah.
And that's a novel, not necessarily based on your own life, but I'm guessing, and we're going to talk about it, drawn inspiration from your own experience, probably. And you've written a second book, in Dutch it's called Op een haar na, which is still being translated right now.
Yeah, I wrote it in English, being translated to Dutch. Yeah.
Right, thank you so much, welcome. And at the end, we have Kwok, who has been writing for quite a while. Started in 2010 with a novel, Bijna Thuis, Girl in Translation. And then Dans met mij, Mambo in Chinatown. The Perfecte Zus, the Searching for Sylvie Lee, who came out in 2019, your latest novel. But you also wrote poems, short stories, and essays in the meantime, and I think long before your first novel came out as well. Thank you also for being here. This evening we will talk about different topics from an Asian perspective on the Dutch book market and how you write as a writer with an Asian background. But we also like to include the audience at home and in the theater here with us. If you have any questions after each segment where we have a main topic, we'll allow some time for questions from both you at home and here in the audience. So feel free to have anything that you were wondering answered tonight. And to start the night off, I would like to ask Sun Lee to read a little bit from your book for us.
Hey, since nobody has bought the rights in English yet,
You will do it.
I will read from Dutch.
And it's called De zoete zure smaak van dromen.
Ja. Wij gaan eten. De eerste keer begreep ik het niet. Begripvol keek de blonde moeder me aan. Als je de volgende keer mee wilt eten, moet je dat aan ons en je ouders vragen, goed? Net als de koektrommel was ook etenstijds afgebakend in de nette huizen van mijn vriendinnen. Daar hoor je wel of niet bij. Ik hoorde niet bij wij gaan eten. Toen ik bijna 12 was, mocht ik van mijn ouders eindelijk heel af en toe bij een vriendin blijven eten, waar ik dan wel welkom was. Met hoge verwachtingen schoof ik aan keurig gedekte tafels. Links een vork, rechts een mes, een lamp boven de tafel, een vader aan het hoofd. Een moeder met een schort achter het fornuis. En daar maakte ik voor het eerst kennis met het eten dat mij zo lang onthouden was. Het waren de maaltijden van de jaren 80. De globalisering was nog niet doorgedrongen tot de keukens in het dorp. Vlees werd in een zwarte pan gebakken in margarine, bestrooid met vleeskruiden en gegaard in een plas water met de deksel erop. Om 6 uur leek het hele dorp, de straten leeg en donker, de huizen geel verlicht, ernaar te ruiken. Aardappelen en groenten kookten in hun eigen pannetjes met water, 3 pannen verdriet. Ik kwam erachter dat vlees, en het maakte niet zoveel uit van welk dier, zo hard en taai kon zijn als een gekookte tak. En dat nootmuskaat de dingen die het taaie vlees vergezelden niet naar iets anders dan water kon laten smaken. Nu begreep ik waarom groente mijn klasgenootjes deed rillen. Ze waren vergeten het water van de rivieren uit de keukens te pompen. Onherkenbaar waren de groentes die ik normaal gesproken vrolijk naar binnen schoof. Snotterige, bleke hoopjes pap aan hun einde gekomen door de verdrinkingsdood. Waterige aardappelen, waterige boontjes, waterige bietjes, waterige worteltjes, waterige dopertjes en waterige prei. En dat prei geserveerd kon worden als een zelfstandige groente was me bovendien volledig onbekend. De stekende jaloezie die ik voelde jegens normale kinderen met hun opgeruimde huizen, bij elkaar kleurende kleren en betrokken ouders werd verzacht bij elke hap die ik van dat eten nam. Die arme kinderen. Ze werden gemarteld. Dit was geen eten.
Thank you so much. It's filled with humor, your book, I think, with regarding food, but also looking into the Dutch culture from a different perspective.
Hopefully, that was the intent.
I wanted to talk, the first topic that we kind of want to brush on is the diversity within Asian voices, because you three have something in common, that you're all three foreign-born Asian writers who are now living in the Netherlands. But we kind of want to prevent people from thinking that that is then your shared story. So to kind of show you how diverse the stories can be from each individual writer, I was kind of wondering maybe each one of you could tell us a little bit of your story coming to the Netherlands and what kind of identity you found here.
Well, I came to the Netherlands when I was a baby. I was 3 months old, and I grew up here entirely. So I think that of the 3 of us, I am mostly rooted here. I'm very Dutch, I think. And I think in that sense have been, faced with the most conflict, I suppose, between the 2 cultures. Because the culture that I got from my parents, the Chinese culture, was very domestic. It was, even the language that I spoke, Hakka, I only spoke it within the vicinity of my family. And then all the rest of my world was Dutch, except for TV, because TV was American, which was good, because that was an escape for me. And so when I'm writing, I think that's what I bring to my pages. I try to, give my perspective of what it's like to grow up here, looking different, being different, feeling different, but so wanting to fit in here.
And touching upon that last episode, which you can still see back on YouTube, you can rewatch them. We had a guest writer who was Pete Wu, who wrote the Banana Generatie, the banana generations, about children who grew up with very traditional Asian parents, but with a very Dutch surroundings in upbringing. But you wrote your book way before that touched upon many of the same themes, I think.
Yeah.
Did you feel recognized in his book as well? That you're like, all right, I'm having a shared experience?
Definitely. I think it was a very close association. And I was, first of all, really happy that somebody else appeared and wrote this amazing book, because I think the Banana Generatie is so good. And to give space for these voices that had been silenced for so long. And, I really recognized myself in the stories, and I also, and it also caused me, and I texted this to Pete. I texted to him, your book has radicalized me. I felt, but it was more of a rationalization of why I was writing this book. I felt a need to express this story, but after reading his book, I feel the urge and the need to write many more of these stories and to increase representation in hopefully all forms of media, in literature, theater, TV, and that's my driving force. So, Pete, if you're watching, amazing.
Right, and I think that is what we kind of want to touch upon, that if more people read even your stories, they can also be feeling a little bit of touching each other's souls and thinking, I feel seen and I feel recognized in your shared experience, and maybe we get radicalized from there on as well.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say in that is that one thing that I saw repeatedly in the different stories was that a lot of people felt, at least for a part in their lives, they felt ashamed of being Chinese or of Chinese heritage. And they felt they really had to repress that in order to fit in. And I recognized that as well. And I thought, damn, that's what we need to really overcome, and to embrace positivity and to be proud of what we've come from. Yeah.
We're going to touch more on that. But first I wanted to talk to how you have a very different identity, I think, when you were growing up and taking it with you here. Can you share us a little bit about your story of coming here?
I was born and grew up in Shanghai, so I came here like as many current Chinese students. I also came here to study, to do my master's study. So I came here when I was 24. I'm still a young person, but your worldview and your emotion, everything basically has shaped. So your mother tongue is Chinese, and the family, the values, the family upbringing. So by the age when I'm 24, unlike you cannot reshape, change that much anymore. Something deep-rooted thing. I know my identity is very clear to me. It was never a struggle for me. So, but after I came here, so the Dutch culture is like a mirror. So I see the Dutch culture and I know my own identity. Before that, you will never think about that, who you are, where you're from. It's never a question because you're in a monoculture society. Everyone's the same as you. But when you're here, you see the difference through other people. But at the time, it didn't occur to me to write a book about identity, about who you are, who am I, until I lived here for about, how many years? Between 5 and 10 years, I think 8 years. I started to kind of meditating on such stories, and then there was a kind of accident, I would say, some other writers who encouraged me to write about stories I knew when I was happened when I was a child, and then somehow blend into the modern life. So I was trying to do this kind of storytelling just for fun, for myself. And then I started to realize I'm writing the story, it's not just for myself, but also for people of my generation, have a similar experience as I am. We move abroad from one culture to another culture, and we start to search who we are, and we thought we are global citizens. We're moving around in the world, we're roaming around, became very Western, but actually it's not. We're carrying our culture baggage with us, something hidden very deep. So it's also about searching times of modernity and the cultural heritage. So my book is kind of evolved in that way without my awareness. Yeah,
because your book, Shanghai Blue, is the main character also comes back after living for 10 years in the Netherlands, comes back to Shanghai and kind of has to reposition herself to the Chinese culture a little bit as well, right? Because
it's a bit reverse culture shock.
Yeah, you can't help yourself of taking a little bit of the of the country where you've been living for so long back with you to your home country, even though there is where the foundation has been laid. What kind of culture shock did you experience? Is it the same as your main character, or did you have?
The main character, what she experienced actually is what I experienced. Yeah, similar. First of all, I think if later I will read a little part,
excerpt.
but just to give you a hint, the smell, as you also point out when you read the book, the smell of mildew. When I was living in Shanghai, I didn't realize that. But when I went back, every time I landed at an airport, the first thing I noticed was the smell. The smell was so different. The thing is the wet with the mildew, something in the air, and assault you. And the people who living there, because everything smelled like that, you wouldn't pay attention to. I think then, as an outsider, when you go back, then you notice that.
And do you, after you've revisit and review your home country, do you recognize things in yourself again? Like, all right, that is where my foundation is coming from, or how does that search go within yourself when you see in a mirror, both in the Netherlands, but also having to reflect that reflection back when you go back home?
Yeah, you do see a lot of things. Something are changing, both in yourself and in the other culture, but other things are never changed. Something deeper. It's very difficult to describe in words, but if you're interested, you can read a book. It's more about the relationship between people and the perception of like life and death, those more philosophical, fundamental things, how you see the world, how you see people as a group.
And I think also something I found very interesting in your book is that even after so long being away from childhood friends, from family, people immediately go back to square one. Like, yeah, we're still family, we're still best friends, even though we haven't talked to each other for 10 years. But I think they can also maybe, and I don't know how your experience was, that do they think of you as the same person from 10 years ago, and did they leave enough space for you to show your new identity?
No, actually you play different roles. When you're here, you have your own role or identity, but there, because you're part of the family, part of friendship group, and you become your old self, so-called. They expect you to be your old self, and they wouldn't understand your new self in another context. So I'm, you can say, more split personality. In different contexts, different situation, you're a different person, and the other people have different expectations of you. You may have that too in your family and in Dutch society, probably.
Yeah, no, and that's the problem.
And I think that for a lot of people who are growing up here with a very Asian upbringing, but then having to go out to the world that's very Dutch, and you kind of feel in between, like you're not really fully the Asian person that your family is. You don't have that baggage that they have with the knowledge of how things in their culture work. But then you also don't get fully recognized by the Dutch society as one of theirs as either. Mm-hmm. Was that the same for you?
Same. And the longer I'm here, and the more you feel I would never be 100% assimilated to the Dutch society. Even if I want to, I don't think Dutch people will accept me 100%, treat me as a normal Dutch person. But back home, I look alike, maybe just on the surface, but sometimes even taxi driver can tell, oh, you are coming back from abroad. I can tell. You just sit there, I know, because you're trying to get the safety belt. You put your seatbelt. Small details, people can tell you are different. And also, my friends, families, what they are talking about, what's going on, things on TV, all those small things in everyday life, you cannot catch up with them. You don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, you kind of miss out on everything.
Miss out a lot of
always
things,
a little bit. Yeah. Jean, how was that for you? You have a very different route with a little detour from China towards the Netherlands.
Yeah, no, that's true. I was born in Hong Kong, like Sun Li, But my parents actually moved to the United States, and we moved to New York City. So I grew up in America, and we were actually extremely poor when we first went to the US. So I remember going on in the taxi from JFK Airport and thinking, oh, I'm going to see, and we know in Chinese, America is called the beautiful country. So you're expecting what you've seen in movies and in magazines and streets paved with gold and women in fur coats. And we wound up in the slums of Brooklyn in this incredibly run-down apartment that didn't even have central heating system that worked. So I lived really quite in poverty for a number of years, and we worked in a factory. I worked in a clothing factory as a child in New York City. I grew up, I went to Harvard, I got a different life, and I remember I always kind of thought, well, I wonder if I'm going to marry a Chinese guy or an American guy. And then I met this Dutch guy who's sitting right there, actually. So I met this Dutch guy, and I moved here. So that was the second immigration experience of my life, that I went first from east to west, from Hong Kong to America, and I moved from America to the Netherlands. So the funny thing is, of course, I've written now 3 novels, and I wrote them all here, all in my attic in my little house in the Netherlands. But my 3rd novel, this one, Searching for Sylvie Lee, or in Dutch, The Perfecte Zus, is the first one where I really talk about the Netherlands. And I really wanted to do that. I manipulated the story so that I could talk about the Netherlands. And I think so much of what we've been saying here tonight are identities are different, our books are different, but we also have so much in common. Yeah. So much that feeling of being an outsider, that feeling of needing to split yourself into different people, that you are carved up like a melon, like they used to say about China, that, how do you integrate yourself? Who are you actually? I mean, those are all things that I think we all deal with.
And what was that search for you like? Because especially if you switch from 3 countries, what kind of identity do you construct of yourself?
Well, I think that, just like Yutao was saying, what you understand when you move from country to country is that your identity is partly carried within yourself, but is also partly reflected back on you. And I really liked what you were saying about the mirror. I think in some ways the culture is a mirror reflecting back to you. But in other ways, it's a really distorted mirror, because if you're in your own country and you say, oh, I grew up in Forest Hills, everyone knows what Forest Hill means. They know if it's rich, they know if it's poor, they know if you're well-educated, they know if you're not. You say, I have a degree from this place. They know what that means. When you move, all of that is gone. So all of those, everything that people reflect back on you, when you tell them who you are, there is a blank. There's no reflection. And I think that in a way you have to be very strong as a minority, whether you're born here or you have moved here, because you have to carry your identity within yourself, and you have to know who you are, whether or not people are reflecting back to you the appropriate signals. So I think, I've had it, in some ways, the switch from Hong Kong to the US was by far the most difficult, because the 2 cultures are so different, and the languages are so different. And I didn't speak any English when I went to America. And of course we were very poor, and I was a child, and that was, the circumstances were difficult. But the second switch from the US to the Netherlands was also surprisingly difficult. You would think that it would be very easy, but actually it wasn't, because it was easier because I had my husband, I had his family who are Dutch, so I had people to pave the way, and I knew from my earlier experience how important it was to learn the language, to integrate into the society here as best I could. So I understood that. But Dutch culture is something very unique and special. And it is a real culture shock, even coming from the US to here.
And then even then within the Netherlands, it differs so much from which part of the Netherlands you finally ended up. Where did you move with your husband?
We were in the Leiden area, so we're still kind of close to The Hague, close to Amsterdam. So we're not really, really far east or anything, but it is a real change.
And it still isn't as diverse as it could be, but certainly your upbringing was in Friesland up north, where I think the diversity was very limited.
True. Yeah, there was Indonesian community, actually Moluccan, and that was it. But they were the cool kids. I was not.
But I think that it also probably plays a role that even within Asian communities, you still maybe not find the connection that you were hoping for, that you could collect yourself with. At least I'm part of the Asian group. But if there's a group of Indonesian or Moluccs that you're like, I still don't get recognized as one of them.
Yeah, I so wanted to be like them because they had cool parties, they had like good food, and they had a very communal society. And I was just with my family, where there were strict rules and things. So yeah, I think that. But yes, I've moved around in very traditionally Dutch, very white environments, like going to school, going to university, working at a ministry. All of these environments were predominantly white. And it shaped me more than I would want to acknowledge, but yeah. And also I think what is also interesting about the three of us, that we are all linked to the US in some way. Of course, Jean is American, and Yutao is married to an American, and I lived in the US for years. And one thing that I found very striking there was that when people asked me where I was from, they would say California, and there was no, inquisition as to where I was really from.
Well, that is sometimes a relief, I can tell you. Yeah. That you don't get but where are you really from question.
Exactly, yeah.
I want to wrap a little bit of the introductory part up, and if there's any questions in the audience so far or at home, please leave them in the comments and we can get them through our moderators here. If there are any questions so far, please let us know. And otherwise, we have one over there. Someone's bringing over a microphone for you. It's in front of the screen. Coming to you.
Hi.
Hi.
So I actually have two questions, if that's all right. Son Lee, you mentioned that representation matters, and that made you feel why it was important to write a book. Do you feel like you made any changes after publishing your book? And actually, if the others can answer that question as well.
If writing my book has changed, or representation, or if representation as a whole has changed.
Yeah, representation as a whole.
Yeah, it has changed, and I think mainly, I think if I look at the audience all Asian, it's amazing, and I think that's one of the biggest changes. What I've seen in the last 2 years, 3 years, I suppose, is the establishment of different communities, platforms, Asian Raisins, of course, Pan-Asian Collective, and Meer dan Babi Panggang. I mean, before there was no such, I think, organizing, and we were saying, beforehand, it has made me braver. It has made me braver that there is a Piet Wu, that there has been I don't know how many people he interviewed, like 50 people he interviewed, and that he has done his show where people have been willing to speak up about their experience. And I wish the speed was a little bit, higher. But it is, I do think that the space is opening up, and there are opportunities that are created now. And there's an interest, you know, I mean, I personally was approached to write a play, a theater play, and I have a seat at a table at TV producers, you know, they are interested. There is a recognition that, hey, this is important and this is actually needed as well. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And you also had a second question?
Yeah. So I was wondering, I think you wrote the autobiography, right? I feel like that in Asian culture, when you tend to repress yourself, and you don't want to be visible to the world. So, what was the process like to publish your book? I mean, to me, it feels like it must be very vulnerable. Like, did you feel the same, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, it was terrifying, and that's why I use an alias to write, because my family still had the restaurant when the book came out, and now they've retired. But yeah, it's terrifying. But the funny thing is that most of the readers that would show up when I would do these things, when I would go to a library to give a talk or things, were mainly white people of elderly white people, mainly women. And so it was fine. Speaking about your family past and everything, it's easier towards complete strangers, until I did a talk in The Hague for the China Festival. And the whole audience was Chinese. And I was giving the same talk I give at every same place, because I just wrote the whole thing out. I gave the exact same talk. I read the exact same excerpt, and I cried so hard. It was ridiculous. Tears were running down my face, because I felt I was talking to my family, and it felt like, and I know, Jean, your first book, I feel must have been, you know, in parts very autobiographical.
Yeah. No, I know that feeling, especially indeed where I think it is a part of Asian culture that you are not supposed to really rock the boat. And, you know, I think maybe every type of family has their secrets, and then they're not very happy when a novelist is born in the family and starts writing all stories. So indeed, my first novel was Go in Translation by Nethuis in Dutch, and is very based on the life I told you about being very poor and growing up. And it's about a girl who is torn between her life in an exclusive private school, which she's tested into, but her secret life as a factory worker and being poor. And so when I wrote that book, I thought, nobody's ever going to ask me if this is based on my real life. You know, it was extremely naive. And I also thought, yes, I'm going to write it as literary fiction, which means nobody will ever read this book. But then it became an international bestseller, and it's taught in schools all around the world. So, of course, the thing everybody asks me in every single interview is, was this based on your real life? And I think, like Sun Li said, you know, you grow. You grow into that role. You realize that you have a representative purpose, a representative role on top of being an author. And I understood that it was important to answer the unspoken question, which was, are people really this poor in a Western country like America? And I thought it was important to say, yes, absolutely, they are. People struggle, people work 24/7 in many different ways, in restaurants, in all kinds of other ways. And I thought it was important to stand up and say that, because I think most people who are working class do not write books. I think most of them are too busy trying to survive. And I think that the ones who do make it out tend to want to leave it behind them. You know, they're ashamed of it. They don't want to think about that past anymore. They embrace their new life. And I thought it was important to actually say, yes, this is not an autobiography, but it is based on things that actually happened to me. What about you? What about your relationship with...
With my book.
Yeah.
Your family and shame.
Yeah.
No, actually, I was very surprised that the book itself, even though it's not autobiographic, but I drew
From life.
drew from the real life stories from my family members, not my parents, but kind of my neighbors, my uncle and aunts, lots of people I knew. 2/3 of the characters of the book are based on real life character. Maybe 1/3 are made up. So they're including family members. So I was very afraid when the book came out in Chinese, what my parents would think. And they read the book. I was waiting for them, their answer. And then they start very quietly, silently in WeChat and share the book in a family group. And I said, oh. And then they start to give out as a present. They're so proud, but they didn't
It was
tell
a
me.
blessing.
Yeah, and I was asking, then my father started telling me on the phone, a weekend call, and he said, this book is no good. You made it up too much. It doesn't reflect reality. But then he gave me lots of lectures, like a real Chinese parents do. They never encourage or compliment their children. But secretly, they were giving out, recommend to other people. So I was very grateful to them.
Oh, I was very grateful that my parents weren't able to read Dutch.
Actually, I had the same thing too. My first book was translated into Chinese, but I did not give it to my parents. And then my second book, my second book is about a young girl in Chinatown who becomes a dancer. And, I worked as a dancer for a number of years, also in between my degrees in New York, and I had totally lied to my mother when I was doing that. So I had told her that I was working, doing computer programming at a company. And so, but I thought, I'm not going to get busted because my mother doesn't really read books and she can't read English and she doesn't speak English. But when that book came out, my second book, Mambo in Chinatown, Dans met mij in Dutch, this huge article ran on me in Chinese in the largest Chinese newspaper in America. And my mother was like, what have you been doing? I was so busted. I was so in trouble.
Yeah. My book got optioned to, there were requests to be optioned to become a movie or a show. And that's the point where I went to my family and said, what do you think? And the response was, we think a book is good enough.
Really? You turned down an option because of your family?
I felt like I had already exposed them quite a bit. It was one thing to read it, and the voice, it's in first person, so it's very subjective. And I thought to see it on screen, at that time I wasn't as radicalized as I am now, so now I am more open to it.
So if anyone at home wants to produce a series or a movie about your book, they can still call you now.
Yes, it's an option. But there is a responsibility. Writers are parasites. We are, because we're looking for material the whole time. And your family is the closest thing you have, and you have strong feelings towards them, so those will come out, I think.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your answers. And it was really important to write your books, and it must have taken a lot of courage to do that. So thank you.
Thank you for your question. We're gonna go to questions another time after this, because first I'd like to hear a little bit from an excerpt from Vier Aziatisch book, because we've touched upon your book a little bit, but now we can experience what then it's about.
Yeah, I wrote in Chinese, but I will read the English translation. Shanghai smells of mildew. Muggy air assaults as I step off the plane. I remember only the monsoon season having this smell. Now it is August, a month after the monsoon, but the smell is everywhere. Passport control, luggage hall, people's clothes, taxi seats. The city reeks of decay. Everything in it rots, even modern, glittering, chic young men and women. This familiar smell upsets and smoothes me. My mind says my hometown should be clean, bright, fashionable, modern, proud. But my senses tells me It is not. I smell the walls of my childhood home in the monsoon season, walls that sweated gray-green mildew spots and the stank of wet plaster. Shall I continue? I think that's enough for you to get a taste of it, the English translation. Yeah.
I love in your book the whole city comes to life. Normally people describe a city in a way of like the lights and the bustling streets, but with you the whole smell comes to add another texture to the.
Yeah, this is lots of reader feedback to me. Said that the book smells.
Kind of feel it.
Yeah.
The next topic I was gonna approach is, we already kind of touched upon it, was how you incorporate your identity through writing and how you discover your own identity through writing. And I think the question from the audience really touches upon that, on how responsible do you feel writing about your identity and representation to have the perfect image, or to not reduce someone back to stereotypes, and that you kind of have the responsibility of being a role model as both a writer and the story writing. And
So I feel that very strongly. I think that that's really important. And, you know, it's very difficult because every character and every person is an individual, and you want to tell an honest, true story. But on the other hand, I'm aware that there are not very many Asian stories being told, so that I know if I create an Asian character who's very much one way or another, that might be one of 3 images that somebody knows about Asians in their life. So it's very difficult. But I am very aware of it. I mean, as a writer, I'm often asked to blurb other people's books. That means that before the book is published, the author or publisher will send me the book and say, oh, can you please say a few nice words about this book? And we'll put on the cover or on the back cover. And I read a novel that I thought was very good. It was really well written. It was about black-white relationships. It was really about racism and race. And yet, the only Asian character in the novel was so stereotypical and spoke bad English and worked in a nail salon and was racist. And it annoyed me so much, you know, that I told them, you know, normally I'm just politely say I didn't have time to read if I don't want to actually write something about the book. But I said I actually found this offensive, especially in a book that is about race and about relationships between people and understanding each other, that the only character in the novel that's Asian is so negative. And on the one hand, of course, you have the right to write whatever you like. But on the other hand, I felt they should have at least incorporated another Asian character who could maybe balance that scale a little bit. So it's something and they changed it. They went back and they changed that character. And I think that that's something that is important. And I think that it's important to speak up when we see it, because our children, you know, they're at school, and that's when the kids are teasing them, the images they get are from stupid stereotypes like that. So if we don't want that to be perpetuated, we as artists have, I think, the responsibility to tell many different stories. But then I think it's up to the publishing world and the readership to accept many different stories, to read them, to enjoy them, to share them, so that we can then maybe, it would be all right to write a character that might be extremely negative, because there are so many stories that we know that's not the one story.
And you already mentioned before that you were thinking of, you know, should I or not write about such the hardship of poverty and the stereotypical immigrant lifestyle almost. But did you make certain decisions that you were so self-aware of, wait, I'm writing something now that could be the one story and I maybe should alter or should not alter it?
No, I think that, you know, I think that you have to really walk that line. I mean, if you write stories about really good, great Asian people. Nobody wants to read them, you know? They don't exist. I mean, I think you have to be honest. Your character has to be deeply flawed. But you hope to make him or her flawed in a way that makes other people understand them better, that makes them identify with them better. You know, nobody wants to read about a stereotypical blank character who's perfect. Nobody wants to write about someone like that. But when I write, I am as honest as possible. And I believe in our right to tell our stories. I think that my family might be happy, they might be unhappy. It's not their decision. I write what I'm going to write, and I have a right to write that, and I would never turn down a film option. I asked my parents,
I'm sorry, right?
I think,
Yeah.
you know, and I fictionalize everything. So it's not like, you know, my father's in the book. Of course, parts of my mother are, parts of me. I'm in every single character in my books. If I'm exploiting anyone, it's myself. Because even the worst characters are aspects of who I am. So I think if I can take it, well, I think they can take it too. Yeah.
I think the difference is whether you're not in control of which part you're letting out to write. But certainly we had a little bit of a talk beforehand to we always do this before we talk a little bit to see what kind of stories we can get. And you were talking about how self-aware you became writing a new novel of that representation and maybe internalized racism. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I had been spending the last 3-4 years of my life writing a novel, my second book. And I thought, okay, this time I'm not going to write about myself. Forget that. I'm not going to write anything personal. I'm not going to write anything about my family. And I was going to write something, you know, set in Chinatown in the 70s in Amsterdam, and where heroin was coming to the city, and an illegal migrant was sucked into it, and then betrayed himself and everybody else. And my editor thought I was going to make it really cool, like Sadie Smith. But in reality, I was writing such a stereotypical book that it was ridiculous. And I realized, oh my God, I think I have internalized these perspectives about Chinese people in the Netherlands. Oh my God, because I'm writing about every single theme I think that people know in the Netherlands. It's restaurants, it's illegal migrants, it's heroin, it's the mafia. And there was nothing new that I was bringing to the table, and it was so stupid. And I spent 4 years of my life doing that. I couldn't bring it to life at all. It sucked so bad. And then I read Pete's book, and I was working on a series proposal, and where the producer had also said to me, I love the story, but your character's quite white. I mean, there's nothing associating her with any of her Chinese heritage. And I was like, yeah, so? And then I realized, oh shit, what am I doing? Because I felt this, you know, when I was promoting my book, every interview I did, for every newspaper, radio, or TV, they would always set me in a Chinese restaurant. Which, of course, I mean, to be fair, it is very much about being, you know, a child in a Chinese restaurant. But still, I felt like, oh, my whole book is about how I escaped that and tried to outgrow it. And here I am, you know, 30 however old, and I'm still, you know, put behind the napkins and the goldfish and everything. And I thought, and this is actually the story I need to tell. Because when I look at my generation of people, we have, you know, outscored any sort of metric, have, you know, been the first generation in our families to go to university, to have these jobs, to travel the world. We are part of this society, and that's what I actually need to write about. So in March, I dumped the whole thing and started anew, because I realized this is a story that's now currently not being told in fiction about Chinese, Dutch people, that you have this modern life and still yet you carry that legacy of having grown up in these restaurants and having people view you still as the person who works in a restaurant where you're an international lawyer for an international organization, for example. And that's when I thought, oh, I guess I need to write about that. Damn, I'm writing about myself again. But that's the only possibility that I have. Yeah, I think that when writing, there is no escape from self. You only really have your own complexity of emotions, the good and the very bad and the very flawed, and everybody knows that story is driven by conflict, and there's plenty of conflict there. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I feel a really strong responsibility, and it might still suck, but then at least I'll have tried. Yeah.
Because we're kind of stuck on the time, I'm gonna open the floor again for questions if there's any in the audience or at home. And I've seen one who's still eager to ask the questions he was wanting to ask the first time round, maybe. But yeah, and if you have a question at home, please type it into the comments. We can still answer it from here.
Hi, actually, I have several questions, but I would just start with two. The first one is, have you considered to have a pen name instead of the real name? So as to avoid the issues you mentioned before. And the second question is that I'm curious about your writing routines. So do you write only when the inspiration comes, or you write certain pages per day? And what would you do if you don't have inspirations? Yeah.
Well, the first one, I think Sun, you can answer.
I have a pen name. It's not my real name. Yeah, I have a pen name to protect my family. And now it feels quite nice, actually, because when I do things like this, I think, I'm going to be Sun Lee, and I'm just going to, and then I go back home and just be myself.
Is Sun Lee a different personality than...
I think it's
Your
more like
true-
the show pony version of myself. Yeah. And then on writing, yeah, writing requires discipline. It needs your butt in the chair. And for the novel, I'm now writing from 7 a.m. until 1-ish, 12 noon-ish every day. And when there's no inspiration, which is often, it just sucks, and you just type crap. And you'll edit it later on. I think that's my process right now. And torture. Yeah, torture.
Jean, you have written many novels by now. How is your process?
I think that it is really important to try to develop a process. It's not easy, especially for me, because naturally I'm the kind of person who likes to do everything the night before. So, I'll put off, but you can't write a book the night before. It's not possible. So I do have a kind of complicated process where you cannot wait for inspiration. Absolutely not. I do think that sometimes people get stuck and they think that they have writer's block because they don't have enough craft. They don't understand enough how a book works, that the book is not structured well enough. So I'm a big believer in structure. My books are very structured. And even though hopefully it's invisible when you read the book, I know that in the middle, there's going to be a big, exciting development. I know the end, there's going to be another big thing where it seems like everything gets thrown up in the air, and I plan that from the beginning. So when I'm writing, I will make changes, but that planning, I take a lot of time to do, and I think that that's a big part of not getting stuck. But yeah, my husband actually just gave me this great advice, which was he said, he's a clinical psychologist, and he said, you actually have to think of it as a job. And these are your writing hours, and you're going to do your writing in your writing hours, and then when you're done with your writing, you're going to stop. And that was the problem, was that I would kind of write, and then it would take my whole life, and then it'd be midnight, I'd be like, I haven't done anything, and then I'm trying to write, and then, it's like you just become this big mess. And now I try really to write in the hours when I can write, and I'm lucky to be a full-time writer. So I get up and I really try. I have a book overdue. So I try
Start
to
the night before.
really write until 12. I take a little break, and then I write until 5, and then I stop. What about you?
Yeah, similar here. Structure, I also believe in. First of all, let me address the name. It's my real name, but I used to, when I submitted my first manuscript, I used the Western order, Tao Yue, for the Dutch publisher. And then I have a very good Dutch translator. She reminded me, she insisted, you have to use your real Chinese. That's you. Tao Yue is not you, but Yue Tao is you. You have to be your real, true Chinese self. I think it's good advice. I reversed my order to the Chinese name order.
For the people at home who don't know that in China you say the last name first
Family
and then
name
your
first.
first name.
Yeah.
So your first name is your second name in the Chinese order, but you've reversed it back for publishing.
For the Chinese order. In terms of writing, I agree with both of you. That's also how I do it. Structure and discipline is everything. Of course, you need some inspiration, some ideas coming, but that's only the first step. And after that, it's a long process. Writing is a labor-intensive job or work. It's not just a mental, but also labor. You need to be able to sit behind the desk, your computer, for hours and have to be disciplined. I'm not as lucky as Jane, so I have a job, a full-time job. I still have to kind of carve out, even though my job is not office job, I still have flexibility, but I need to reserve time every day. Sometimes maybe when I'm busy, I cannot write every day, but I'm trying to keep the rhythm going. I used to write every night, every evening, but then I noticed I couldn't sleep because my mind is still working. And then I changed to in the morning. I got up early, start to write like 8 o'clock, at least to 10 o'clock, and then people in the office start to get busy, and I switch to my work. Sometimes I didn't want to stop writing. I don't want to answering work emails. Yeah.
There's a little trick I once learned that once you get in the flow of writing, you should actually stop, because then you'd like to return back to the book and continue the process instead of thinking, I've gone all the way till the end and I can't go anymore, and then you stop, then you think, I don't want to go back into the process, because then it becomes a hurdle instead of a thing you look forward to. Yeah. So it's good that you stop when you look most forward to writing again. Thank you so much. I'm checking the organization, how we're on time, and if we can continue with the questions. Because there's another question in the back.
Hi, first of all, sorry for being late. I was stuck with job, so that's why I want to apologize first. My background is of media, so book is a really, really useful medium for everyone to know about the culture and also identity. So these conferences about identity, so I wanted to also bring up about the contemporary representation in entertainment industry. For instance, like movies or TV series. Because for me, I feel like more and more Asian representations are coming up now in screens. So I was wondering, how do you perceive now? Like, do you see more positive image, or do you think we need still more efforts for that for our generation? Thanks.
Yeah. I think that times have definitely changed. I mean, I think that when my first book came out in 2010, Girl in Translation or By House, there was a lot of interest in it in Hollywood, in making it into a movie and so on. But when you make it into a movie or a streaming series, it requires millions and millions of dollars. And nothing just ever got off the ground because there was not enough belief that there was a market for stories like ours, for Asian stories. And I think that absolutely in recent years, and especially since Crazy Rich Asians, that movie that was such a big success commercially, books and movies and, people opened the door for us. People, when it shouldn't be run by money, but money is a huge factor. And so when one film like that is successful, it makes everything else more possible, because it makes those suits who are working, at Netflix and who may not know the most about literature, they start to pay attention and to say, oh, well, that film did a lot and there were Asians in there, so maybe, this one might be possible. So, you have this kind of movement. I've certainly noticed it because my books have been optioned now, and I know that the people working on them and the kind of force behind them is much more powerful than it used to be even just 10 years ago, for example.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I would have to say that
Sorry, wait,
it's
I've gotta repeat the
You
question.
asked, are they white people?
So they're still like Hollywood, like mainstream, let's say, media companies?
There are, I would say it's a combination, so that I have been approached by major companies that were headed by somebody who is non-Asian. But as a part of the talk, one thing that you talk about is the fact that you want an Asian team involved and that you don't want them to make your character white, for example, or set the book in Texas or things like that. So those are things that you as the author have to make clear. But I do have to say that there is also quite a lot of Asian, not a lot, but there's significantly more Asian representation in Hollywood now, and those people are also involved in seeking out stories like ours.
Thank you so much for your question. Jean, do you mind maybe reading a little bit from your book as well for us?
Sure. Yes, so this is, in Dutch, is the perfecte zus. In English, it's Searching for Sylvie Lee. And it's the story of two sisters. And there's an older, dazzling, brilliant sister who disappears. She comes back to the Netherlands to visit her dying grandmother, and she just disappears without a trace. And then it's up to her younger, shy, stuttering sister, Amy, who's always been in her shadow, to pull herself together and figure out what happened to her older sister. So I told the book in three voices. I told it in the voice of Sylvie, the brilliant sister, Amy, the stuttering, shy sister, and Mom, the mother. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about language, and I wanted to talk about how we are separated by language. So in the book, even though the book is all in English or all in Dutch, Sylvie is thinking in Dutch with Dutch expressions and Dutch grammatical forms. Amy is thinking in English, and Ma is thinking in Chinese. So I'm going to read you a little bit from the section of Amy, so you can see how Amy, the English-speaking one, sees Ma. And I'll read you just a little bit from Ma's point of view. So this is Amy first. And Amy comes in and she sees where Ma's working in the dry cleaner. And there I find Ma standing behind the long counter, talking in her broken English to a well-dressed woman with sleek honey blonde hair. We were quite horrified to find one of the buttons loose after we picked this up, the customer says, pushing a man's pinstriped shirt toward Ma. So sorry. Ma's small face looks wan and pale against her black clothing, her eyes puffy from crying. I fix. The woman taps a manicured nail against the countertop. Her tone is both irritated and condescending, as if she's speaking to a child who had misbehaved. It's not really the quality we expected, especially after your prices went up. So sorry, Ma repeats. So this is how Ma seems to the Western white world. But Ma is, of course, her own person in Chinese and a completely different person in her own native language. So for Ma, I'm just going to skip to Ma's chapter where she deals with the same incident. She says, well, I'll start from the beginning of the chapter. I was as ignorant as the frog at the bottom of the well when I let Sylvie return to Holland. How many times must I surrender my daughter to that land of wind and fog and loss? She already spent the first 9 years of her life there, and then 1 moon ago, when she heard my Ma, her grandma, was facing death, she rushed to book her ticket for Amsterdam. Sylvie was but a leaf withering from homesickness, fluttering downward to return to the roots of his own tree. I was so busy with Mrs. Hawkins, whose fair skin hid ugly features, that I did not notice when Amy entered the dry cleaners. I sat down to sew tighter the button Mrs. Hawkins had complained about. I had shown it to Mr. Hawkins when he picked up the shirt, and he said it wasn't a problem. But he must be more than 60 years old, and Mrs. Hawkins is closer to 40. He is an old cow eating young grass, and so he must pay the price for his pleasure.
Thank you so much. I think I want to finish the evening with something that happens in your book specifically, but which happens to Yatau's book, I think the most, is the loss of translation sometimes. And in your characters, they communicate with each other, but there's language barriers. And I think, how is it for you as writers to have your work translated while you write from a different language, and that you maybe lose control of how things are maybe translated?
I mean, you work with translator, you cannot have total control. It's always impossible. And also you have to trust your translator, trust your publisher. They know the market, they know the audience, right? But I have been lucky working with a very good Dutch translator. And at the beginning, she was assigned the work. I proposed we meet and talk about this book. She said, no, let me do my work. So she did her work for half a year. And then she got in touch. When she was almost done, she got in touch to check with me upon some sentences, some expressions, this or that. I really appreciate that. And since then, we became good friends. And during the process, and later I heard from other friends, actually, she went to check with different Chinese people about her translation, certain specific things. She wants feedback from different people, not just from the author, but also from people who know this language or that language. I think it's very conscientious, kind of dedicated translator. So it's kind of like, in the end, it's a bit like teamwork. It's 90% of her work, but also 10% is the input from other people.
And I think it's based on a lot of trust as well from
right.
you as the writer.
Yeah.
Jean,
Your book has been published in 20 countries, I think.
Yeah, my books are out in 20 countries, and I have learned to let it go. You just have to let it go, because it's too difficult. Well, first of all, there are often languages that you don't speak. I mean, of course, you're very talented, so you speak all these languages and can check the translation yourself. I don't speak, Russian or, Hebrew or many of the languages. And I think what's funny is that are the covers, because they create the covers, and they are always very kind in asking for approval. And they say, well, is this okay? I always say yes, although sometimes I'm like, because, like, for example, there's one of my covers, is for a Scandinavian country, for one of my, I think my first or my second book. And, my first book, Girl in Translation by Vier Aziatisch, about the girl who works in the factory, right? And the cover is of this beautiful Chinese girl, but she's really big, like she's bigger than the skyline. The skyline's here, and she's enormous. She's like King Kong, And then she's got this apple, and she's eating an apple. I'm like, there's no apple in the book. Like, why is this beautiful, enormous girl eating an apple on the cover of my book? It's like, is it Adam and Eve, and she's lost her innocence? Yeah. Or is it that she worked at the factory, and she's really hungry, and now she's eating the apple? And then my editor told me, she was like, they liked the picture. They thought it was a pretty girl, and they put it on the cover. So, and sometimes you kind of just have to let it go. Yeah,
you both have the Dutch and English version with you for searching for Sylvie Lee and the Perfectieven, but also yours.
I have it too.
Shanghai
Very similar
Blue and
kind of cover.
Those are quite similar indeed, but for searching for
faces.
Sylvie Lee, it became a little bit of faceless.
I want to add on to that. I think for publishers, also for the book market, the cover is very important. The publishers really wants to. They have the kind of they have the sense which kind of cover works for their local market. And my book, if you look at the Chinese cover, is also very different from these ones. And my Dutch cover used to be a very pink cover with a naked girl's back, just sitting on a chair like this. And then my husband said, what, is soft porn? But my editor insists on this is the best cover. Dutch people will love it. So they have somehow the different interpretations of the imagery, and also the title for each of my translation, the English, Dutch, and the Chinese all have different titles. The Chinese one was called the red cricket. Originally, this is the insect, because the cricket is a kind of red thread throughout the book.
Yeah, the cricket fights as
Cricket
well.
fight,
Are main
And
theme.
but when it was translating to Dutch, the publisher thought, oh, what is the little bug? It's not appealing. So it would end up in some kind of strange corner in the bookstore. So they want to give another title. So the editorial team brainstormed and came up to the title, Schimmering boven Shanghai. They were very proud of the title. But then the English publisher came in and they said, no, we cannot use the title. It's Dust Above Shanghai. Reminds them of the vampire trilogy. So they said, no, we don't want to have association with or Twilight. Twilight trilogy. Yeah, so came up with another title. They want something also Shanghai in, but it's not a perfect title, but a different one. Yeah.
How does that, because we've already talked about a little bit of being the role model, since you're sometimes very self-aware that you're the representation that there is for Asian writers. Does that play a part within seeing the covers that are mainly Asian women?
Actually, I object to that. I said, why we need to put the Asian woman's face on the cover? And all the people ask me, is this you? And especially with a pink back. Are you?
Did you pose for that?
Yeah, I think that there is a question of marketing and who runs the publishers and what the market is or what the market is perceived to be. We trust the people that do the marketing and do things like coming up with the title. There is a question of how representative are they? I don't know the answer to this question, but I think it is a valid question to ask.
And is it a struggle for you as writers to think, I know they know what's best and what's most sellable, and I want it to be read by the most people I can get, and then maybe later on I can get more influence to change things? Or do you think, I wanted to represent the book as close as possible so that it will immediately reach the people that I had in mind to reach with the book?
I wasn't that savvy as to know who would buy the book, to be honest. I think that especially this was my debut. It was the first book I ever written, and I had no idea I was going to write a book. So I kind of felt so privileged to be able to write a story, for it to have been published, and for there to be media attention to it, and for people wanting to buy the book, that I had no idea of these things. I was just completely oblivious. Now I would strongly object if they would put a naked Chinese woman on the front of my book. I'd be like, don't you think there's enough objectification? But yeah, it's a different position. I think it matters where you are in this process. Jean, obviously, she's a New York Times bestseller. Jean can say, nah, this is not happening.
Well, I think that legally, they never give you the right to approve the cover. So, you have to be really, like Stephen King maybe can approve his covers. Right. But the rest of us, it's written into our contracts that they will show it to us, but the end decision is always the publishers. It's difficult. I know a lot of authors, not just, of course, Asian ones, and many authors hate their covers. And I think that it's our right to speak up if you have a cover. If they give you a cover that you hate, I think that you should tell them. I mean, I think that with this one, Searching for Sylvie Lee, I really loved this cover from the beginning, but the little figure of Sylvie, this in this, and actually, this picture was actually taken in the Netherlands, so it's a Dutch picture. Not that I took it, but they had this picture. But what was interesting was that in the original photo, Sylvie here was wearing a different dress, and I didn't like her dress. So she was wearing this very frilly blue, like flowery dress. And I thought Sylvie would never wear a dress like that because Sylvie is a New Yorker, she's sophisticated, she's smart, she's hardcore. She would never wear like white flowers. So I thought, should I say it? Should I not? I don't want to be difficult, you know. And so I did say it. I said it to my editor, and they actually brought in somebody to reshoot the model. So they brought the dress and a mannequin, and an expert reshot the dress and photoshopped it into this picture. So there is another language, some language I can't remember, that is using the same picture, but they have the original dress. So I think the publisher will accommodate you as much as they can. They want you to be happy.
Yes.
But in the end, I tend to be pretty easygoing about the covers and stuff because like you said, I know nothing about marketing. I have no idea who's going to read the book or, you know, this book was marketed very much as a literary mystery and suspense novel. And I was like, it is? Like, really? It's a suspense? And I got on all these lists for, you know, best suspense, best crime read. I was like, crime? You know, but that it got it into people's hands, and that's just, I don't know. I mean, it's something I don't know anything about.
I just realized, I mean, I take everything I said back because I realized that actually my publisher asked me, what type of book covers do you like? I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And I made a Pinterest board. That's right, I made a Pinterest board. And I really like, you know, I like drawings a lot. So I think that they did listen very much. Sorry, publisher, you were great. No, honestly, and so they really listened to me, actually. Yeah, sorry about that.
But it's good to be self-aware of the power that you could hold, to be listened to if you speak up, I think.
They do want you to be happy. I mean, there's no point having an author that's unsatisfied. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think for time we're gonna wrap up, but I think we have some time for the questions if they're still in the audience. I see hands going up, and
Yay.
I think can't see from there. I think there's one also from the live stream. If you have questions, send them in, and we'll get a mic to you for a representative who will answer them. But first, someone from the audience.
Thanks. So first of all, thank you for the time. It's been really brilliant to hear all this culture, female writer identity about us, I mean Asians. So my last question would be, since we're here all representing the Asians, first one is, have you, women, powerful women, found your identity now? If yes, could you also give us, like as young people or young immigrants here, some wise advice to see how we can find our own identity? Because this is the question that I've been struggling. Now, I lived in Netherlands for 3 years. Sometimes I feel I'm English, sometimes I feel I'm Chinese, sometimes I feel Dutch. So really like to hear your advice. Thanks.
We touched a bit of that already in the beginning, but maybe we still have advice how to center yourself within your identity.
I think that identity is really something, you know, like voice. People ask about voice in writing. How do you find your voice? And I had a writing teacher who said, well, maybe your voice is more something that you can't get rid of rather than something you find. You know, I think that your identity is at the core of who you are. And I don't think you have a problem finding your identity. I think maybe the problem is that your identity might not match with what other people expect of you, and that your identity might be unique, that mix of cultures that you are is not what most of the people around us are. And I think it's a matter of accepting that. And it's not that your identity is something outside of you that you have to find, but rather it's making peace with who you are and with the fact that it might be different from what other people expect. And that's something I have every day, and I'm used to it by now. So, and I appreciate it because I think you guys touched on it too. The joy of being an outsider is that you always know you have a choice. You know, you have to choose, but then you know you have a choice. And you said this earlier, Tao, that it's not, you're not in a heterogeneous society where everything is the same. You are homogenous. You are in a situation where you are the anomaly. You are different. And then you have to always evaluate, what do I think? What do I believe? Who am I in this situation? That's actually a great gift, even though it can be difficult.
I think that's why we do these nights as well, to have more voices visible for audiences like yourselves, to read more from different perspectives, from different walks of life, so that you maybe find a voice that you recognize yourself within, to match yourself, mirror yourself, and like, okay, there's someone out there like me.
I just want to quickly add on to that. I want to ask you, in which language do you dream?
Ooh.
Funny enough, I don't dream.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm a really good sleeper, so I'm really
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I would say now I switch the language to English.
Yeah, and maybe the psychiatrist can correct me. They're saying the language you dream in is your identity, so-called, which is you really connected with, you identify, your subconscious. And if your subconscious English, probably your English identity is the strongest. And then it comes to the question is, how people perceive you, how you perceive yourself may not match. And here you have to find some kind of reconciliation between the two.
Exactly. I feel like being unique is something really important, but also you have, like, I mean, the question that I ask is not like trying to find the identity, because exactly like identity cannot be found. It's just like by reflecting yourself and your life and then trying to see who you are, and then you would just seek it throughout the life. But it just is an open question. So there is no like right, wrong, or anything. Yeah, but thank you.
I think that what Sun-Li, you were talking about, being braver and being your own representation, might also help with finding people who resonate with that. And then sometimes you got to be the first to step up.
Yeah, and I think that identity is bound to so many aspects of your life. It's not just, heritage or the place you reside in. I mean, I didn't think of myself as a writer, and now maybe in the next few years I'll take that on as part of my identity. And I think trying stuff out, just try things out, because now we live in a time of opportunity, and you have the chance to become whatever you choose to be. And yeah, I think that, and feel free to do so.
Thanks. Another question from
I
the
think
audience.
this lady in front here.
Hi, thank you so much for tonight. I have two questions. The first one is short and practical. Can we find your English books here, like in the bookstores here?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, cool.
I'm sure they're in the English bookstores or online is bol.com, or you can always order online.
Okay, great.
Try your local bookshop also first, but also the library has them. So I don't know if you saw when you entered the theater, there was a display of all the both Dutch and English versions, the library here.
Cool. Thank you. So the second one is, so since you are kind of public figures, and as Asian ladies, do you feel vulnerable sometimes? Because we do have problem, like yellow fevers and races, and if you do feel vulnerable, and how you deal with it. Thank you.
This has made me really sad, actually, the attacks on Asians here in the US, it's made me really sad. I have personally not encountered that. Of course, I've encountered racism a lot, but no physical violence or the threat of physical violence. But I know many people who do feel fearful, especially when coronavirus just, had landed here. There was so much hostility that it felt as though people now finally had a reason to vocalize or to give some kind of aggressive expression to hostility that they had been harboring for a long time. And I think it's really scary and, really horrible. Yeah, but I personally don't feel, and I don't feel like a public figure, just to be clear.
And I think your question might also be referring to fetishization of Asian women as well, because there was a recent article in Viva in which Hui and I were both interviewed about the fetishization of Asian women, especially in the Netherlands. And I do believe it exists, absolutely. And I think that when I travel and I'm on a book tour, for example, I'm usually traveling alone because they will fly you from city to city and somebody might pick you up from the airport and take you to your hotel, a driver or someone. But basically in between the stops, you're on your own. And I do get quite a lot of proposals on, not proposals for marriage, but, suggestions on Facebook, for example. So when I was interviewed for the article, I actually thought, I'm going to go look at my Facebook page. I have 2 Facebook pages. I have a professional one and I have a personal one. And the personal one limits you at 5,000 friends. So a lot of times when new friend requests come in, I don't even look at them or answer them. But I thought, how many unanswered friends requests do I have and how many are from men? And I looked and I have 260 unanswered friend requests from men. And most of them are like the, hey, angel kind, that like they don't even bother to know what your name is. It's just a kind of blank message that they stick in places. And sometimes, I go places and I get asked to dinner or, someone offers me to drive me around or to show something to me. And I never go. I just never go. I think that, as I said in that article in Viva, I think that people say, what's the boundary then? When do you know if it's a kind of fetish or if it's just someone trying to make a connection? And I think you feel it very clearly because when it is that sort of fetishization, you are an object to them. And it's something that's very close to racism. You feel that it can turn on a dime. They're trying to get you to pay attention to them, but there's a lot of aggression and hostility underneath it. And you know that there's nothing about approaching you as a human being and saying, oh, I'd like to be friends, or I'd like to get to know you, but it's really about you as an object. And yeah, that I think, especially since I'm in the US, that's something I am aware of. But I also think, I am a person, I am who I am, and all I can do is go out in the world and be honest about who I am. And then you are careful as a woman with the risks that you take.
Yes.
Yeah. Next question. Thank you so much.
I actually have a question that quite connected to this lady. It's about when you speak different languages, do you feel like you have different personalities? And like, for example, and also like when you are only speaking one language, you really miss speaking another language. Like when I'm here, I really miss speaking like Mandarin and Cantonese. When I'm in China, I really need to speak some English. And the second question is that I wonder who are your favorite writers, and do you also feel like when you are writing, your style are subconsciously influenced by the books you're reading at the moment? Yeah.
Great question. Taoyu, maybe you're the...
So the question, first one is about language, right? Which language? no, I myself, I don't consciously feel I'm a different person. But then my son, he speaks both languages, 3 languages. And then he can tell, oh, when you're on the phone with your Chinese friends or my parents, and you're a different person. Then you are on talking to your colleagues, for example. He can tell different languages. I have a different persona. Yeah, this definitely. And the second question is about writer, right? I think the writer you're currently reading have some subconscious kind of an influence on you. But whenever I'm writing a book in a big project, usually I'm trying not to deliberate, not to read into too much of other writers, to just keep my own writing going, unless the writer is really, I want to draw inspiration from certain, if I have blog or something, I would pick up a book which is similar to the style of my book. I want to, read and just give me some relaxation.
That's my
There's a
fault.
red cricket going off. I don't know if it's a timer. Final questions from the people at home.
This is a question from Wang to the 3 authors. If you are going to use one adjective word to describe your works and one to yourself, which 2 would you choose?
Ooh, one adjective to
One
describe your work and one yourself. Your book and one yourself.
That is a really difficult one. Because, of course, we're writers. We like to have a lot of words to describe ourselves. I think if I were to describe my work, and I only had to pick one, I would pick poignant. And the reason is that I think poignant is a word that is bittersweet. You know, it's a word that has a lot of different flavors in it. I think poignant is something that is meaningful to you, that might break your heart in some ways, but only because you love it. I think that in every piece of work, you know, there's a combination of entertainment and illumination, right? You want to educate, but you also want to entertain the reader. And I aim for that mix in my novels, so that hopefully the reader is moved at the end of the book.
Yeah, Tom?
Okay, for book, I would pick the word gray. It's not very flattering word, but I'm interested in exploring the gray areas always, not black and white, but something in between, the subtleties and the complexities. I think this we are interested in writing, right, exploring our characters. This I'm trying to do. And also, by focusing on gray, you can break the stereotypes. Because stereotypes is black and white, or you are preaching. Some kind of bad writing is about preaching. We want to show the reality, the real complexity, and of either situation or person, and like identity, and show to the real world. And everyone can connect to that, can connect to the gray, actually. And for myself, I don't know if it's adjective, but I would use in between. And for the friends who are here, and they know, I have, with some other friends, we founded a kind of a club, culture club, called In-Betweeners. It's a people like us who do not want to take sides, who do not think we belong to any kind of mainstream thinking or big groups. We want to maintain independent in our thinking, in our perspectives, and we want to bring all the in-betweeners together. From different perspectives, we can complete a big picture. For example, Asian, we have a different perspective, we're all in-betweeners. And then by giving our own stories, then other people, our audience, can see what the real Asian people are.
Great.
Yeah.
Sun Li? A little bit of a writing challenge.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Late at the night.
Well, it's my cricket that's going, sorry. And also, I think best to describe my style currently is, I don't know what the English word for that is. Tragicomedy?
Tragic comedy.
Yeah, it's tragic comedy. I think it's tragic comedy is what I'm trying to go for. I want there to be laughter, but I also want people to cry on every page. And I think that the things I'm writing about lend themselves for that very well. But yeah, I like comedy. I like to have comedy in my work. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's it. I like to thank the audience for the great questions and your time for so far, because we've been running late, but that is inevitable with great writers and so many stories that are still left to tell. Audience at home, thank you for watching and sticking with us. There are previous episodes, in case you've missed them, that you can still watch online on the YouTube channel of OBA. And there will be another collaboration waiting for us with Pan-Asian Collective and the OBA in October 22nd. And I want to thank my guests for your wonderful stories, vulnerability and humor, and your time as well. And I hope to read much and many more books from you in the future. And I want to say good night at home and here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.